Okay, good morning where I am. I've just finished reading this book, Kleptopia, by Tom Burgis, and this book is amazing. It's breathtaking. I actually found it quite difficult to read initially because it's a, it's, it's an investigative book, so it's not a story. So it's got real names, real characters, and a lot of those names are Russian names, uh, Kazakh names, and I found them quite difficult to remember because they're not familiar to me. But one of the main characters, or the main character, I guess, is Nursultan Nazarbayev, who was the leader, president of Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan was, I think, formerly part of the Soviet Union, maybe. But when it was de-Sovietized, when it left the Soviet Union, or about the 90s anyway, basically the guy in charge was Nazarbayev, and like a lot of the um, ex-Soviet Union, he set about privatizing all of the assets, essentially becoming a kleptocrat, much like Putin is said to have done to become probably the richest man on earth because you know the Soviet Union is vast with massive mineral, natural resources and everything else, and controls a lot of stuff. And then, of course, you've got all the oligarchs who got rich through being close to Putin, essentially. And I think Putin's an KGB guy. So, but it's not really about Putin, although he does feature in it. It's mainly about Nazarbayev and the Sultan, and actually it's about all of us, but they are the centre of the plot, along with a guy called Nigel Slater, English guy who worked in finance and at one point worked for the Financial Services Authority, now the Financial Conduct Authority, as well as other banks. Bank of England, I think he worked at for a while as well. Um, but incredible story. So essentially, you've got the kleptocrats, these people who want all the money for themselves, and based on the ones I've read about so far, maybe there are some benevolent ones. Based on the ones I've read about so far, if you get in their way, if you try and take their power, you're dead. Your family's dead. You're screwed, basically. So, um, Abli, oh God, I can't remember the guy's name. Uh, there's a guy who was part of the National Bank of Kazakhstan, uh, who essentially grew a bit wary of Nazarbayev's sort of dictatorship, taking everything for himself. He was sent into exile by Nazarbayev. Nazarbayev then mobilized the troops, the media, the papers, and everyone else just to basically say that he's been stealing from Kazakhstan. Billions he's been stealing from Kazakhstan. He was taking it from the bank, but actually, what it mainly came down to was Nazarbayev wanted those billions for himself. So who's the thief? I don't know, whatever. But I'll I'll pause there and just say I'm not one for conspiracy theories. I think they're generally bullshit. Most things are simpler than they appear, and but people love a good story. And this seems to have been seeded. This whole thing about the major prevalence of conspiracy theorists and everything. They've always been around, but by the fact that one of them was president of the United States, he's mentioned in this. What's his name? The Donald Trump. So why is Trump mentioning it? It's basically about dirty money. All right. So Trump is the first president, or was the first president, in the West at least, that we know of, who completely ignores the facts. If what's being said or what's happening doesn't suit him, well, then it's fake news. It's all bullshit. So he was the first guy who really took control using things like Twitter, and then, um, I'm sure that the people who controlled the media channels were somewhat aligned with him financially. It's not about power. It's not about people. It's about the money. And well, it is about power. It's not about democracy. That's for damn sure. So, for example, this is all referred to in the book. There's a time when Trump's inauguration speech was watched by half or a third of the number of people who watched Obama's inauguration speech, but he didn't like that. So the images that went out were of a completely massive crowd, taken from God knows where, and oh, this is the most watched speech in history. All right, Donald. Right? But a lot of people believed it. It was all bullshit. So it's interesting now that we've got this asshole Johnson running. He doesn't run any fucking thing. Running the UK. Um, And basically changing the ministerial code. Oh, I fucked up, I lied, I stole, I did whatever. But you know what? I'll change the ministerial code so it means you can't fire me. Just change reality to suit you. You've got Priti Patel. Don't even want to mention that name. It's like drinking vomit. Evil, racist, horrible person. But I'm sure there's some kleptocracy to it. I'm sure it's to privatize some power for her. Now, this is what happened in the Soviet Union, isn't it? Power was being privatized into the hands and the bank accounts of a few small people. But what's shocking is the lengths they go to. You know, women, children, kill them, murder them, rape them, do whatever. You just don't get in the way of me getting my money. So most of the plot is about Nazarbayev chasing Ablyamov. I hope I've got that name right. Um, I'll try and find it in here. Basically, chasing this guy who was the head of the Kazakhstani National Bank, and he got pretty sick and tired of the way Nazarbayev behaved, and so Nazarbayev he wouldn't hand control of the bank over to Nazarbayev, and so Nazarbayev was like, okay, I'm not having this. So he gets exiled. Part of his family gets kidnapped. All kinds of stuff happens. He never goes back to Kazakhstan. Um, there are people imprisoned in here. So there are these miners. This is where it kind of came home, where it affects everybody. So there are these miners, and one of them's an old woman. She's in her 70s, I think. And she's seen a documentary on the Middle East, on Dubai, and how everybody there is getting rich, and there's all these beautiful skyscrapers and everything. And it all happened in 20 years or something because they've got oil. And she thinks, well, we've got more oil than they have, and we've got fuck all to show for it. So what's going on? Well, they've got fuck all to show for it, but Nazarbayev's brothers, sons, nephews, in-laws, they're all billionaires, the richest people in Kazakhstan. And so she then questioning, can the president actually know what's happening here? I mean, our good president, can he know what's happening here? So she goes on a protest, and there are hunger strikes and everything. And then eventually she finds out, she's a miner, that documents issued to the Treasury show that the miners are all getting paid twice what they actually received. And then she figures out the rest of it's going to Nazarbayev and his cronies. So she joins a protest. People on Nazarbayev's side send in some people to pose as miners and then to start attacking everyone, which is the excuse, of course, for the police to open fire. People get killed, buildings get burned. Appropriately, those buildings have records of dodgy financial dealings in them. And this woman, she gets kidnapped. She gets tortured, she gets beaten, she gets threatened to have her daughters and her children brought in front of her and raped to death. All nice, democratic democratic processes, as you will. But here's the thing. After this protest, Nazarbayev was due to give a speech at Cambridge University just to show how far Kazakhstan's come, what a nice, acceptable, respectful, democratic place it is. So there's somebody whose names we'd all recognise in here, who was writing his speeches and helping him out with full knowledge, I'm sure, of all the torturing and murdering and raping and stealing, because it kind of is similar to what he did himself, without, basically none of the horrible stuff. Thank God our politicians are a bit more decent than that, although the way it's going. Tony Blair, employed by Nazarbayev for 13 million a year to write his speeches and make him look good and brush over all the truth. Yeah, Tony Blair, I think, was the first obvious I don't give a shit about you kleptocrat to be a Prime Minister of the UK. So, of course, it wasn't the last. So Peter Mendelsohn got in the act as well, trying to make a shit ton of money by helping these dictators. And when I'm talking about dictators, I'm not just talking about Nazarbayev. Guess who else pops up in this book? Robert Mugabe, yes, helped by the Brits. Actually, Robert Mugabe helped by an ex-Soviet Israeli hedge fund manager who basically gave him the 100 million he needed to steal another election and murder a few more thousand people, so that the hedge fund manager, something to do with Glencore, could get cheap access and secret deals to the mines, basically. These are the people who run things. It all goes back to this three people here I'm not going to name, but they were called the trio. One of them's dead now. They run things. I mean, they run fucking law firms in the UK, all kinds of shit. Judges, they've got them in their pocket. Not just the UK, America as well. And generally, it's people coming out of the ex-Soviet Union. The Chechens are apparently who you use to frighten anybody. They're the gangsters, according to this book. This book is very well researched. There's a ton of resources, sources and citations and appendices at the back. So well researched, in fact, that the guy was threatened with legal action by lawyers all over the world, who were basically controlled by the people he's writing about. HarperCollins was threatened and everything. They didn't want this book released. Probably best not to mention their names. But the other people's names we can mention because we all know about them. Donald Trump. Now, here's another guy who likes to. The UK, London, is the world's biggest money laundry, which, one thing he mentions here, which is why, the UK government won't tax the rich, because the rich are giving them too many backhanders, and then the really rich, all their dirty money comes to the UK. So one of the other main characters in here is a guy called Nigel Slater, and he used to work for the FSA, Financial Services Authority, now the Financial Conduct Authority. He had tons of evidence on all the bullshit and all the money laundering and all the theft and everything that was going on. Big criminals, big crimes. When he took them to his superiors, he was summarily fired. Guess what? They're controlled by the oligarchs and the money men as well. There is no Financial Conduct Authority. Merrill Lynch, one of the biggest money launderers out there. HSBC's mentioned in this as well. David Cameron gave a talk to Merrill Lynch for which he was paid £3 million. It was an hour talk by these kleptocrats to stop them letting a merger go ahead that would have weakened the mining interest of some of these guys. Peter Mendelssohn's in there. Now we've got Tony, not Tony, what's the other idiot's name? Boris Johnson in charge of. He's not in charge of fucking anything. He just does what his bosses tell him as long as they give him backhanders and he gets to do cocaine and shag as many women as possible. Something hilarious has happened in the States. Apparently during the Queen's Jubilee, he had to read something from the Bible about honesty. People were laughing out loud. Anyway, amazing book, absolutely amazing book. The West is no longer really a democracy. It's a kleptocracy. We're all fucked, if you want to look at it miserably. But read this, it's incredible. There's something in the newspapers today about there is no way that Jeremy Corbyn should be given, should be allowed to infiltrate Labour, because Labour now, whatever it used to be, they started the NHS, thank God for that, although the Conservatives have repeatedly been caught lying, saying they started it. They tried to shut it down 14 times, and for the last 10-15 years they've been selling it off to line their own pockets. Fuckers. So yeah, Labour did a lot of good stuff, but now Keir Starmer is basically just another a kleptocrat as far as I'm concerned. Completely denies the obvious truth in things like his undying love and allegiance to anti-Semitism, to Israel. See, they've even confused me. Yeah, Israel would like you to believe that if you actually question their murdering ways, then you're an anti-Semite, which is basically what happened to Corbyn. They couldn't get him. Corbyn actually came in with a genuine interest in helping the people, in doing things that would help the people. Some of his ideas are a bit radical, a bit crazy, but what the hell, And countries where that has been done are so much better off now. Germany nationalised transport system. Yeah, basically they can pay €9 a month to travel around the whole country. €9 a month. It cost me, a lot more than that just to go into London and back, and I only live 12 miles out. Okay, France nationalised energy sector. Their bills rise by 4%. In the UK, they rise by over 50%. Nationalised energy sector. So nationalisation can work, but you get a lot of resources like that. You get the kleptocrats involved. Grenfell came up in this because Nigel Slater, the guy I was mentioning, used to live around the corner from Grenfell, but when Grenfell happened, he was no longer around. So they said, the government said, the local borough said, well, we can't rehouse these people because there's no houses. It's bullshit. Within 5 square miles, there are over 2,000 empty properties. Guess what? They're all owned by kleptocrats and their cronies. So really a fascinating book. This is a longer review than I often do, but it's because the tentacles of this book touch everything. So there's a lot to talk about. Difficult to read, so not the most enjoyable read necessarily, and I like to read quite quickly, so I haven't got time, to go over a name and memorize it. But definitely worth reading. Definitely worth reading. If it wasn't difficult to read, I'd give this a 10 out of 10. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I would just read the back for you, okay? So this is from the author of Dark Money, Jane Mayer, a powerful, appalling, and stunningly reported expose. Reads like fiction, but unfortunately it's all too true. And then the blurb: a body in a burned out Audi, workers riddled with bullets in the Kazakh desert, a rigged election in Zimbabwe, a British banker silenced for trying to expose the truth. In this real-life thriller, award-winning investigative journalist Tom Burgis follows the dirty money that is flooding the global economy, emboldening dictators, poisoning democracies, and corroding all that we hold most dear. This is the book the lords of the new kleptocracy don't want you to read. In fact, they did try to prevent the publishing of this book, like I said. And then from The Economist, a hero straight out of a John Le Carre novel, wonderfully, if grimly entertaining. The Guardian, a ghastly and very important story. The Washington Post, a must-read magisterial account of money and violence behind the world's most powerful dictatorships. George Monbiot, oh, I know George Monbiot. He says, if you think the UK isn't corrupt, you haven't looked hard enough. A terrifying book. Jon Snow, his landmark book, Read It and Act. The Times, meticulously reported in the style of a fast-paced thriller, gripping. Read it. Kleptopia by Tom Burgis. Okay. Sorry that review is quite long. I hope you enjoyed it.